Welcome back, everybody. It is Life Coach Labs. I'm your host, Chris Angel, and with me today is Ethan Butte. Hello, Ethan.
Hello, great to see you again. Happy to be here.
Thanks. I feel like the type of energy you and I have, I would say you're my friend. We've only met once in person, but I think we're kindred spirits, and I'm really excited for our conversation today, for sure.
100% agree.
Yeah. You wrote a book in the fall, this past fall, called Human-Centered Communication. And I want to unpack that a little bit with you because in this season, this lab, we're talking about leadership. I'd also kind of like to see if our conversation can't go towards growth, which is season 2. But the whole point of leadership is that I think as coaches, we have to think from a different place as leaders about the environment, the landscape we're doing business in. And right now, one of the challenges is all the noise of communication, the non-human piece of communication, the cynicism, skepticism the people we're trying to serve might feel from all the noise and messy communication. So this really, to me, is a leadership conversation, and you're tackling it as a leader. You're leading a conversation about change and digital pollution. And so maybe for everybody to be related to you, just give us a little bit of background on who are you, what do you do, and why are you starting this conversation in the world?
Sure. Thank you for that setup. And you captured it well. So my name is Ethan Butte, as you already said. My title is Chief Evangelist at BombBomb. We're a software company that makes it easy to record and send video messages for a clearer, more personal way to communicate in digital, virtual, and online spaces. And been here for a decade and came up in the marketing team and had just written hundreds of blog posts, done a bunch of stage presentations and webinars and things, learning, teaching, and practicing these methods of trying to restore or rehumanize what's been missing as we've done so much more of our selling and service. And I mean those in the broadest sense possible. Any leader is selling and serving all day long if they're doing it well.
Yeah.
Whether you think about it in those terms or not, I use those terms very, very broadly. And so as we are forced to sell and serve more in these spaces, it's been fun to learn, teach, and practice around these themes. And prior to that, I did come from mass media, which might come up in this conversation. It could. Yeah. Mass production, mass media, mass mindsets, mass audience, et cetera, is certainly part of this conversation and problem. I ran marketing inside local television stations for a dozen years in a few different cities. Wow. Prior to joining this company that had no customers and, a half dozen employees to where we are today, a decade later.
I'm so curious to hear how maybe that informed your perspective now, if that felt human-centered back then, or if it felt not, and that sort of spurred you into this your pendulum swung the other way to kind of see from a different, I'm so curious to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had been, it's highly cyclical, like local broadcast television is highly cyclical. It's almost the exact same stuff every year on cycle. Okay, now it's time to make the winter storm promos and campaign. Okay. Now it's time to make the summer storm, thunderstorms and hailstorms and tornado campaigns, and here in Colorado Springs, it's like time to make the wildfire season campaign, although that season's getting longer and longer. In any case, I think anyone who is not enamored of some combination of the people you serve internally and externally, the problems that you're solving, the product or service that you're creating and delivering, if you don't love it, then it's time to really start getting serious about what's next. And that's where I was with television. I think I won't go on a monologue about local broadcast television, local television news, et cetera. But what I started doing was a bunch of project work with a bunch of different companies, like people that I had met that I was curious about, what would they pay me for? What skills are transferable? What do I actually enjoy doing? And so I ended up meeting the two co-founders of BombBomb when I moved here to Colorado Springs and started doing some work with them and just really liked who they were, what they were about, the vision that they had, and really what you see today in this broader movement of video, email, and video messaging. And what you're seeing in the pages of a book like Human-Centered Communication is the evolution over the decade there. I really do feel like we pioneered this space. We're a bootstrapped company, but we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of venture capital come into the space. Our competitors now are a lot more numerous and more sophisticated than kind of the first wave of competitors that we had as we were coming up, most of whom are irrelevant or have disappeared. And so, what was interesting, and I'll specifically answer the question and give it back to you. I think what was happening in that window, this is like 2009, 2010, 2011. In that window, you had the democratization of video and video recording and video editing. It was just starting to come on. It wasn't in web apps yet so much as it is today, but it was getting less expensive and easier to record and send videos. The iPhone was out. Of course, all the Androids do the same thing. So that was happening. You also had like social media coming on proper before it got really as ugly as it can be today. It was super awesome. It's kind of like when you first got your first email account, you're excited to get that email because it was from someone you knew. It was from your mom or your friend, or it was from your boss, and you knew it was from your boss, and you knew that link was safe to click and all these things. Like that's what social media was in that window. Like there were enough people there that it was a real party, but it wasn't spoiled as an environment the way that it is today with misinformation, like active disinformation campaigns and things, like really nasty stuff, which is to say nothing of just like gross human behavior, which is a consequence of not having to face people eye to eye, face to face. You do and say things that you would never do if you actually had to stand in front of someone and just say or do the exact same thing. And so that was the intersection there. So I was at this transition point where and I was seeing it in the television business. It was fading, like that mass market thing was like falling apart. It was still early days. It's really gone a lot farther downhill in the 10 years since, but in the decade or dozen years that I was there, I saw profit margins go from 40 to 45% at a really good, healthy, high performing station into the 20s. Wow. Still a good profit margin for a lot of businesses, but dramatically shifted. So I feel like my move out of that business and into this space and pioneering this space along with our team and our customers and our community really is about this move from brands and corporate voices to individuals and human voices and real human connections, et cetera. But then also in the mix now, to give it back to you, is the chatbot, the automated stuff, all these other things. And so there's a lot going on there, but it does, I feel like that career transition for me was, in hindsight, it was the perfect time. And it was in a way, a microcosm of what was happening in the broader culture and in the broader market.
Yeah. I think as leaders in any industry, it's important to understand the tools and how to use them. It's important to have a vision. You mentioned vision earlier. It's important to have a vision for how you want to see the world operate and behave. And then using tools that are appropriate to that vision. Absent of vision, absent of knowing who you are, what I experienced myself and what I see in others, when you get into business for yourself, you can feel like you're the new kid on the block and you don't really know how the game is played. You got into the profession of, let's say, life coaching, like this show, because you want to help people. Personal development meant a lot to you, but now you need leads. Now you need income to support this mission and this calling you answered. And so all the ones who strut around with the seeming answer, all the marketers who are strutting around with the supposed answer, I think are a lot of times at the root of this mess. And I say that not to harp on marketers. I think you can be a heart-centered, human-centered marketer. But in the words of Gary Vaynerchuk years ago, marketers ruin everything. And that they wear that as a badge of honor, like, oh yeah, give me email, watch me just, work the heck out of this until I've ruined it. And then I'll move on to the next tool. And so now we have a whole library or buffet of tools that have been ruined because marketers went in, blasted it like crazy until it wasn't productive and moved to the next. And here we are left with the leftovers of like, here are all these tools. I don't have a leadership perspective or vision of how to use it. And so we're not using it well.
Really good. You just drew out something that I completely failed to even drive by here, which is of course, the right tool for the right job. I think that's critical in so many different contexts, but specifically in this shift toward more personal, more direct, more targeted through technology and our ability to do that. Some people are coming to these newer channels with the previous mental model. So people approached email in the early days like direct mail, except with no marginal cost whatsoever. It costs twice as much, or maybe, 70% more to send 200 direct mail pieces instead of 100, or 2,000 versus 1,000. Email, if you get the addresses, you could send 100,000 for the same price or cost or whatever. And so, it's the misuse of the email channel. I think the same thing too across social is a lot of it is kind of like old fashioned broadcast mentality, where I'm just going to speak to, hey, everyone, and I'm just going to blast and trumpet, my successes, or these kind of like superficial, superlative laden messages of best, most, fastest, first, etc. And so it just straight doesn't connect. And that is part of what now feels like pollution to the person who receives it on the wrong day at the wrong time.
Yeah, right. I'm laughing because I just feel like, on one hand, you said earlier, like we'll behave in ways we otherwise wouldn't in person. And I think, and even with those with the best intentions, the best heart, like I said, like in person as a life coach, most of us, I would say all of us, are good with people. It's the reason why we're drawn to life coaching. We're good with people, but then we get into marketing and business and we don't know how to be appropriate with it. We don't know what to do. So we look at how others do it or how it used to be done. And we go, well, I sort of feel like I'm selling out. This doesn't feel totally congruent to me, but I don't know what else to do. And I got to do something. So I guess I'll send an email, or I guess I'll, post about my business, or, whatever it is. How do we start to find our own POV? How do we find our own point of view about a tool as we know we need to get out and reach out to more people?
Yeah, two things there. One, I would, something that was echoing for me there is trusting your own intuition. I think we so often look to I'm air quoting for people who are listening and not watching, like the leaders in the space or best practices, and they're helpful for guidelines. But I think the more we dwell in these kinds of best practices mindsets, especially to the degree that they feel that they don't feel congruent with who you are at your core, honor that, explore that, trust your intuition about what feels right to you. Because as a life coach, like, you are at some level the product or service. I mean, the ultimate product is the transformation in another person, and the way they see things and the way they approach things, the way they execute and the results that they enjoy. I mean, that is ultimately the product that you're delivering, but you are so fundamental to attracting and retaining and working with those people through a service to deliver that outcome, that you can't afford to do things that you don't feel proud of, that don't fit you, that don't fit who you are. So take every recommendation or best practice or thought leader thing and run it through your own filter. There is truth in those things. Like, even the most kind of disingenuous person that's trying to sell, flash in the pan kind of stuff, there's some truth in their message probably at some level, or else they wouldn't be getting any traction at all. I mean, they're addressing a real problem or have some kind of an insight or value. There's something to be taken there. You just don't take it outright. So that's one idea. And then the other one is, again, kind of in this right tool for the right job thing. And the last piece I'll say is, so many people are, and you talked about this kind of dichotomy, like, I'm really good at delivering the service and helping people achieve these outcomes. But when I go put on the sales and marketing hat, I feel like out of my depth, or I'm a different person, or I'm in a completely different role. And part of that is due to the fact that it's relatively new to someone. I don't think someone who has been doing effective email marketing for 8 years now would say something like that. I don't feel like someone who has a really good handle on the culture of Instagram and they're using it effectively and have been for the past few years would say something like that. And what I'm suggesting in this, implied in those durations, is that your voice isn't waiting to be discovered. It's not around the corner, just, if you only just looked hard enough and read a couple more articles and picked up a couple more books, boom, there you would find your voice. You develop your voice, you develop your confidence, you develop your comfort in these different spaces. And so it really is through the exercise, the practice, the habit, that you develop your voice, you develop your handle, you develop your habit, you develop your confidence, you develop your comfort. And so, you know, there are a lot of different ways to say it, but you know, your first of almost anything is not as good as your third, is not as good as your eighth. And so have patience with yourself and, you know, be open with other people. I think people are more forgiving and people appreciate the opportunity sometimes to give grace because not only do they know that it's a benefit to you, but it also makes them feel better about themselves.
Yeah. They're so good. There's a part in your book, I can't remember who said it. You had quoted somebody who was talking about being on emotion is more important than on message. And I feel like if you as a life coach listening to this are iterating your message, your voice, you showed up and you made a post and now you did another one and you're doing another one. In the beginning, that message can be clunky. You don't have enough iterations yet. And so just take heart in, and this is what I heard when I saw that, and you can speak to this, but take heart in, it's more important that you're on emotion when you're showing up in the beginning, because that is what creates the grace you're speaking of. When people feel like you're sincere, even if you're not being succinct, they connect with you. And I think there's grace that is generated for you in their digital bubble or in their sphere of influence.
Love it. First, I always need grace for failure to be succinct. I'm so passionate about what I do. I'm just like, you know, in any case, you're talking about Dan Hill. Dan Hill is awesome. He's an emotional intelligence expert. He has 7 US patents in the analysis of facial coding data. Wow. He's written multiple books on the topic. And so we were talking specifically what Steve and I did, and Steve's my longtime friend and team member and co-author on both books. We roped in 11 people that we thought would have valuable ideas to add to this framework that we were developing of human-centered communication, and walk out a variety of strategies and tactics to be more present, to be more personal, to be more human, to be more effective in digital spaces in general. And certainly talking about live video as we're doing now, like you and I are live on Zoom recording this, or even in recorded video messages with BombBomb or another service. And so Dan, 2 key ideas. Well, I guess 3. I'll start with his overall premise, which is that in business in general, and so I guess I'll translate that into words I've already used. When we put that hat on, that sales and marketing hat or the business hat or the business planning hat or whatever, historically, culture has had us lose some of the emotion. It's not personal, it's just business, right? It's a little bit colder, it's a little bit more calculated. We pretend like it's a little bit more rational than it actually is. And in that way, then we tend to try to consciously and intentionally remove some of the emotion. And that becomes the norm in different spaces, depending on who you work with, where you work, et cetera, what you're working on. Some places it's worse than others. Fortunately, I do feel like through the pandemic, we've been more free to be ourselves. And I think some of that guard has come down a little bit. As command and control kind of loses favor, I think that comes down a little bit. But in any case, I think there is this kind of slight lack of emotional and, in air quoting, professional spaces. However, movere is the Latin root shared by both emotion and motivation. So where there is no emotion, there is no motivation. Further, he adds that memory is also driven by emotion. So if we are to move people to behave or to change their thought or to change their actions, and we are to be memorable, then we need to infuse what we're doing with some emotional component. This doesn't mean act and put on like overdone affect in these types of things. It just means be a real person who is naturally emoting with sincerity and congruency and integrity. And so when we can get comfortable in our own skin and kind of go against whatever culture you might be operating in that suggests that emotion is inappropriate, go against that tack if you want to motivate people and to be memorable. Further, he says, whether it's in a written communication or in a video message, it's so much more important to be on emotion. You already said this, to be on emotion than to be on message. But something that's not in the book that I'll add here is that the reason that that's true in particular is that human beings care about your intent more than they care about anything else. They care about, are you sincere? Do you seem to, these are things that people are subconsciously judging all the time. Is this person sincere? Do they seem to believe what they're saying? Do they seem to understand me? Do they have my best interests in mind? And when we think about that from an evolutionary perspective, why are humans so good at this subconsciously? It's because it keeps us alive.
Yeah.
If we operated based just on what people were saying and promising to us without evaluating their intent or their motivation or their sincerity or their integrity, then we could very easily be manipulated or taken advantage of. 1,000 years ago, that would very likely be fatal. Today, not so much, but still potentially painful, harmful, expensive, et cetera. And so when we are on emotion, we are going to move people to act. We're going to be more memorable, and people are going to have the information that they need to make good and safe and healthy choices.
Right.
Last piece, sorry.
Yeah.
In the absence of that intent information, which really doesn't come through in typed out email. It's one of the reasons that it's so important to mix in some video messages and video communication to the degree that you can't be in person. When people don't have that intent information, they can't judge your sincerity from your typed out text, period. Like it just doesn't work, right? Humans have evolved over millennia for this. And so when we don't give them that information, it's left up to them to judge, and their brain fills in the blanks, and it doesn't fill it in your favor. It fills it in protectively for the person. So if you don't give me what I need, I'm going to assume the worst. And that means that I'm not necessarily going to return that phone call, reply to that email, click through and take that survey, make that personal introduction, or sign the contract or swipe the credit card, any of these various degrees of yeses that we need to be successful.
I laugh because I see my daughter, I'll text her, I'll pick her up at high school, and I'll text her that I'm here. I'll just say here, period. Or I'll say, I'm very succinct in my text message to my daughter, and she's always like, your emoji game is weak, Dad. And I always feel like I'm in trouble. And I love my daughter. We're like, we don't have that kind of relationship. So, but to your point, like, I'm her dad. I'm the closest person to her, and she still reads my text messages as, it puts the negative tone into it. So needless to say, I'm upping my emoji game as it relates to my daughter. And how funny is that actually, does make a difference. It makes it fun. And now, we get a kick out of the different weird emojis I use that are totally not applicable to the thing.
Awesome. And no joke, simply reviewing the emoji library could really pay dividends on a future text to somebody else. Just knowing I didn't even know there was one for that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it just breaks it up a little bit. But what's interesting about what comes up for me as you're describing this is I think everybody listening to this, we are on that page of like, we want this to feel important. We want it to feel sincere, authentic. Like we live a lot of our lives with those values. We don't want to sell out for anything that doesn't feel like who we are. We've done all the shadow work to get here. Like we had careers where we did that. And now as a life coach, it's like we've done the work to figure out, like, this is who I am. Now, from that place though, you also bring up in the book, this balance between volume and value. Like there is this, like, I need a business. I have a vision. I want to make a big impact, as big as possible. And I don't know how to do that with one-off, video message or a really sincere text message. Like, how do I balance these two worlds of volume versus value?
Yeah, very good. I mean, what you're going to wind up with is some tiered approach in general, and it's going to depend on the person, the business model, the volume. Like for some people, volume, like we have about 75,000 customers.
Yeah.
That might sound like a lot to some people or very little to other people, and we're organized around it. We try to serve that volume of people, and we're trying to be prepared to serve more effectively in a way that allows them to experience value, et cetera. So going to a life coach, like you have your super close, tight group. These are either active clients or these are friends who have made referrals, or like, your really super tight network. Then you have like a looser network. And then you have this group of maybe like loose acquaintances, a Facebook friend or a LinkedIn connection, or, someone who filled out a form on your website to get that thing about that topic. But you've never connected with them directly. And so when you start thinking about these, and then further, we could go into any of those groups and segment those groups based on what we know about them. This is why the CRM or some other means of keeping notes on who's who and what's what is so, so important because it helps us do this better. So what I would say, this is just a high level lesson that multiple people spoke to in the book. I'm thinking of Lauren Bailey and Dan Hill in particular, is kind of this what's in it for them type dynamic. And so when we think about each piece of communication, or each time let's think about it this way, each time we're asking for someone's time or attention, this could be it's when we show up in their social feed, it could be a Slack message, it could be an email, it could be a text, it could be a voicemail, whatever. Anytime we're asking for someone's time or attention, the more clear we can be on what's in it for them before we type a single letter or before we record a single second of video, the better we're going to be at serving them in a way that honors their time and attention. And so to tie it back into it's okay to send that to 137 people, or it's okay to send it to 282 people. The problem comes in if you don't feel like, if you just eyeball the list, or, like you maybe go into the CRM and say, I want this, and this, where this is true, this is false, this is between this range, give me a list of that. You should be able to, if you're clear on who is on that list and who is getting that message and why and when, you can be much more specific about what's in it for them. And if you don't feel comfortable being able to answer that across that population of people, maybe segment it further and make it more specific. There are ways to do, kind of broadly speaking, mass messaging that can still feel personal. People don't need, like, your daughter doesn't need a video message from you via text saying, hey, sweetheart, here I am. I'm out in the car parked out front. You can see out my window, blah, blah, blah. It's just, all she really needs to know is that you're here.
Yeah.
Right. So it's same thing. People don't need a truly bespoke handwritten note or video message or personally typed email for every single thing you need to say. People are accepting of that. It's okay to send one message to lots of people. It just needs to be relevant to them. It needs to speak to them. It needs to give them some instinct of, I get it. This is for me. This is about me. There's something here. I understand what that is, and I understand how to proceed if I so choose to. This was not a waste of my time and attention. And so you're balancing, if someone gives you a referral and it's a really, really good referral, I highly recommend a personal video to thank the person who gave you the referral and a personal video introduction to the person who was referred to you. That is a great use of your time if that person, is, as long as you're not selling a $2 thing with a 3% profit margin on it to them. I think a life coach isn't doing that. So I can see a video message going to those people as being perfectly appropriate. You could also do, though, a video update once a week to all the people in this cohort, or you could do a video message that automatically goes out to anyone that downloads that thing off the website, where you're introducing yourself, putting a face with your name, maybe stating kind of your thesis or point of view, or what you're in the world to do, the types of people that you're best at helping. That's going to be better than trying to do the same thing with some typed out text and a bunch of links to various pages of your website and some online reviews, right? They feel like they know you before they ever meet you. So there are ways to do things that are auto-responded, sent to many people, or sent to one person. And the trick, to go back to the spirit of the question, it's like, can I afford to do that? Last thing is, I think so many people tell themselves something is unscalable before they've really felt the pain of trying to do it in an unscaled manner. I think we're capable of more than we think. We just need to pick our spots.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. You said you have 75,000 customers. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So, and at some level, I am assuming that you're not holding their credit cards hostage, like they're choosing to be a customer, right? They want to be here. Correct. And they probably at some level, some feel more connected than others, but there is I want to be here. Like speak to that a little bit. Cause I know there is, as life coaches, I think we value the intimacy of the conversation, the interaction, and there's a common limiting belief around the size of things. Like I can only serve so many people and for it to remain intimate. And I'm not sure that that's true. I feel like there are plenty of precedents set where people feel an enormous connection and they've never met a person. Podcasts are a great example of this because I really like Rob Bell. His podcast is great. And he probably gets millions of downloads a month. And I feel like, I'm sitting in his living room and Rob's my best friend. Like I met Rob once, but that's to me, relationship at scale. Like, do you feel like that's true? Do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I feel the same way, although I've met him 0 times.
Mm.
Um, and,
Yeah.
it really is, again, this is a kind of a right tool for the right job thing. I think as long as you're managing expectations
Mhm.
and solving specific problems or helping people capitalize on specific opportunities,
Mm.
it's up to you to design multiple layers of opportunity that
Mm.
fit different people with different needs at different times. And I think a lot of people can devise a scenario where there's like the free thing, and then the low cost thing, and then the mid cost thing, and then the high cost thing. And the high cost thing is the most intimate, the most direct, the most real direct time. And it makes sense to do that. And the thing is, some people, for who you are and what you have to offer and where they are in their life at this moment, they might dwell at level 2 for a year and a half or 2 years and then fall back to level 1, or they might escalate into level 4. And that's all okay. I think trying to meet people where they are and listen to people and know what people need and want, you might have a service that's, $5,000 a month, and like, just someone's not going to jump that hurdle. They might not need or want that amount of attention, or they might not have that type of budget. They might settle for something less in order to honor their budget, but still get some value from you and still feel like it's a perfectly equitable exchange. In other cases, I might not know you well enough to make that commitment. Even though I do have the budget, I do kind of see the value, but I'm going to dwell at one of these like other levels and kind of get to know you and understand the philosophy, validate some of my own thoughts, see if I do need to escalate my engagement with you directly. I mean, there's just a lot of ways to go about it, but your willingness and ability to make yourself available, whether it's through video, whether it's through podcasting, whether it's through the written word, I think helps people develop an intimacy that they need and want. It is okay that there are going to be dozens or hundreds, or if you're lucky, thousands or tens of thousands of people who develop this parasocial relationship that you and I have with Rob Bell. For me in particular, because I've never met him, I know for a fact he doesn't know my name. He might remember years depending on the nature of the circumstance, so it really is this one-way thing where I know his voice. I can hear his laugh. I know what he's about. I can remember some of the stories he's told. I can remember some of those like really powerful pauses that he's really good at that I don't have in my cadence. And I feel close to him. And it's the same thing, to tie it back to television, by the way. I call this the grocery store effect. It's like back in the day when I was growing up, and I think we're maybe about the same age. So I would extend this to you too. Like, you see the local weather woman in the produce section of the grocery store, like, hey, that's so-and-so, and they're like, if they see you, like, acknowledge that they feel like they know you. They've seen it before, they felt it before, and they might give you a wave, or they might act like they didn't notice that you noticed or whatever. But it's this kind of parasocial one-way relationship that's very, very real from a chemical and emotional and even intellectual standpoint. Like, sorry, intellectually, we know that they don't know us, but we still feel this relationship to them. And that's the foundation. That is the start. That's the trust. That's the start for any level of engagement. It's one of the reasons, by the way, if you are doing a podcast or you are doing a lot of video content, when you can mix in a personal video that says, hey, Jennifer, I want to thank you. You've commented on like the last 4 or 5 things I've put up on Facebook, let's say. I just really appreciate you like paying attention, always thoughtful comments. I just want to say thank you. You're awesome. And I hope you're having a great day. It's going to blow her mind.
Yeah.
And it's going to take you 30 seconds to do it.
Yeah. It's really good. I feel like, to Rob Bell's point, like who he's being, as he's sharing, feels all the things you've said before. It's sincere, it's authentic, it's safe. It's all these things. And so I feel like I know who I'm getting if and when I choose to. I didn't buy anything from the way I met him was I flew down to LA for a 2-day event he did. I paid for that event. But I had been listening to him for 2 years before that, just hanging out, getting to know Rob. And I think a lot of times we rush in the need of growing the business. We rush the relationship. We try to rush the result. And it's just not, I don't think you can put that kind of pressure on something that, like, you want something authentic, but you also feel a pinch of you want your business to grow. And unfortunately, you can't force the relationship on the person in order to cause a result. I think we know this, it's just we get a little, weird about it when we have our marketing hat on. So if you had to leave us with a thought, like what is the way forward here as leaders leading change in the world, transformational change? Like, how do we continue to show up confidently, digitally, and make a real impact that grows our business? Just a final thought.
Yeah, I guess I'll share, again, just doubling back onto developing your voice. Like if you feel uncomfortable in a space or in a moment or in a channel or in a medium, your tendency is going to be to retreat from that and go to the thing that's familiar and comfortable. And that isn't what people need right now. That's not what people want right now. People do want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they're part of something that matters. Yep. And if you are the representative of that message, of that idea, of that movement, of that brand, of that opportunity, meet them where they are and do it with as much confidence as you can. And if you don't feel that confidence, it's simply a matter of practice. It's, I find it to be one of the most exciting and wonderful things happening right now in a kind of an uncertain, messy world. It's always been uncertain. It's always been messy, but I think that ebbs and flows in general. I feel like it's a messy, confusing time right now. And I think that the security of being part of other people and other ideas that are valuable and meaningful, like I think those of us who hold that need to find ways to share it with other people because it's fundamentally attractive to prospects, customers, recruits, employees, strategic partners, and everybody else that our success is built through.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. Well, the book is called Human Centered Communication. Ethan, if they want to learn more about BombBomb or the book, where can they go?
I am Ethan Beute. Last name is Beute on every social network. The book is at bombomb.com/book. Both books are there. It's just bomb.com. And of course, at that website, you can also learn about what we do from a software standpoint.
Side note, I watched the video that you all have, the film, the movie that you've created. Amazing, by the way, such a great movie. So that's on the website as well. If you all want to watch that, I think it's 40 minutes, but it's like a full-on documentary, high production value movie. And you guys crushed that. That was really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being a guest, Ethan. And until next time, take care. Well, that's it, gang. Thanks for listening to this episode of Life Coach Labs. Before I let you go, I want to invite you to two things. One, there is a companion Facebook group to this show called Life Coach Labs. Go to Facebook and search Life Coach Labs. You can see it here on the screen. If I scroll through, this is a companion group to the show. Because it gives me a chance to get to know you. I want to know you as much as you listen to me and my guests. I want to know you. I want to hear about your important work. I want to support you. So please head over to Facebook and join the free Life Coach Labs Facebook group. Number two, let's jump over to the next window here. If you are looking to create recurring revenue in as little as 4 hours a week, I have documented my community model, right? How do you do community? How do you build a membership model for your coaching that incubates the people you want to serve and do it in as little as 4 hours a week? You can head over to lifecoachlabs.com/model. You can see it right here on the screen, lifecoachlabs.com/model, and learn more about how to create recurring revenue in as little as 4 hours a week. Thanks for hanging out with me in this episode. And until next time, be well.